Hello everyone. Welcome to the fifth JHI Forum. My name is Johan No, Program Coordinator of JHI. Today's forum is organized under the pillar Public Literacies, Civic Systems, Media and Emotional Intelligence. Before we begin the forum, I would like to briefly update you on some recent JHI activities. I'm gonna share my screen. So can you see my screen? Okay. So at first, from November to November 20th and 22nd, MIT JHI held its fourth annual conference at Korea University in Seoul under the theme of STEMA, the University of the Future. At this conference, we unveiled the STEMA model for the first time, and the conference explored where universities should be headed in the age of AI and how we might envision a future knowledge which is capable of responding to the today's political, economic, social, ecological, and biological crisis. And here you see some photos from the conference. These are the images of the keynote speakers, uh, Professor Fritz Breihaupts and mythologist David Paternaik. And these are the photos of strategy meetings held on second day, organized the pillars and projects. And here also you can see the presentation by the public literacies pillar, which is also hosting today's forum. And this is also a image of conducting a interview for the trailer production. And this is roundtable discussion entitled "Where is the University of the Future?" And on the third day, we also had a cultural excursion to Hwasong Fortress and Yonggyusa Temple in Seoul and had a wonderful time. And 1 week later, on November 26th, we hosted a special lecture by David Patanaik, who also delivered a keynote speech at the annual conference. And at the conference, he gave a fascinating talk titled Can STEM or AH, Art and Humanities, Reduce Jealousy in the World? And in the special lecture, he spoke on the myth of war and peace, Xunzi, Kautilya, and Yu. And these are some remarkable words from the special lectures. Walls are built when there's no trust, something like that. And both annual conference and the David's special lecture have been uploaded to the JHI YouTube channel. So if you are interested, please feel free to visit our channel. And the trailer for the annual conference is currently in production, and the presentations are also being edited. And we expect them to be uploaded to the JHI website sometime in January. And some of you may recall that last year MIT JHI conducted a survey which measures the impact of the humanities. And this past fall, we conducted a modified version of the same survey at Korea University. And more than 2,800 undergraduate students participated, and the result of this survey will be included in a white paper, which will be released next year. And finally, in addition to our existing pillars and pillar-based projects, JHI is preparing to launch several expanded platforms. We are currently working toward the launch of a neuro-humanities platform, the new diplomacy platform, and the STEMA platform. A meeting to advance the development of the Humanities platform is scheduled for next week, and we appreciate your continued interest and engagement. So now let us move on to the fifth GHI forum. We have two project-specific remarks and panel discussion to look forward to. But first of all, Dr. Rick Eberhard will give a quick overview of the story of the public literacies pillar so far. So I'll hand the microphone to Rick now.
Great. Thank you, Johan, and welcome everyone. So briefly, the public literacies pillar looks to explore play, games, and interactivity as a means to better understand and explain the world around us through GHI's lens of deep time and deep space. And we hope in the next hour or so you'll be inspired by the people and projects that we've brought together. The pillar began actually at the end of last year's annual conference, where I came to talk with the conference folks there about some of our work, and through working with Vipke and working through other folks in the in GHI, we decided this was a interesting place to kind of uh, put a new pillar in place. Since then, we've brought on new pillar coordinators, and you'll hear from them today. And we really look forward to working with them in the next year. So yeah, we're going to start with talking about the two projects that were the impetus that kicked off our pillar activities. And then from there, the panel will talk more about where we might go. Um, so Michael Jacobson and I began working on a project called Changing the Game of Diplomatic Hegemonies in concert with Vipke. We have begun this project with a series of labs and workshops around existing games which feature diplomacy, negotiation, and exchange. Everything from the game diplomacy as depicted here in, I believe this is the 1961 edition of the game, to the TV show Survivor and beyond. And what we're doing is we're critically analyzing the underlying ideological foundations of these games, and then more specifically, looking at alternative models, which that is what I'm going to focus on in this really short talk of this project. I want to call out two recently published games we've played. First, one a family strategy game, and the other a fairly complex sandbox conflict simulation game, which is a broader way of saying war game these days that highlight these alternate modes. So pictured is Winter Rabbit. This is by William Thompson with art by Kinja Swafford. And this is a semi-cooperative game set in the world of Cherokee folk stories. And it offers an alternative to the four X's of colonialism and imperialism that we see in games. Michael and I began much of our board game journey, academic board game journey 7 years ago, 8 years ago, playing many examples of colonialist games still being made today, which focus on these explore, expand, exploit, and exterminate 4Xs. So in Winter Rabbit, the indigenous values of what Thompson terms the four C's in the rulebook, cultivation, conservation, continuation, and competition, are shown here. And he specifies these, they're not direct analogs to these colonial actions, but these are an explicit statement in what the game values and what he values as a designer, and what the Cherokee folk stories value as well. In this game, up to 6 players play as the animal characters of Cherokee folklore, otter and bear, etc. And they're competing to prepare their village for winter, while a non-player character, Rabbit, ever the trickster, is ensuring an interesting challenge for them as Rabbit takes resources away to hide them in his own burrow. And this is a semi-cooperative game in that the players need to prepare the village. Winter is coming, but competition is still a healthy part of life. The player who gets the most renown wins in this game. And all these examples I'll be sharing in this are all commercial entertainment products, I should say, as well. That's our starting point for these labs and workshops. Our next example that we've been looking at is Cross Bronx Expressway by Non-Breaking Space, published by GMT Games. And this is a competitive socioeconomic city builder with collective loss conditions. It places 3 players in charge of different factions working in the South Bronx, representing broadly the public, private interests, and the community, and also which may actually change the specifics of what those individuals are might change over the years 1940 through 2000. So they're kept these broad um, labels throughout. And the players must form temporary coalitions in order to succeed and not succumb to a collective failure, which is focused around the construction of the Cross Bronx Expressway in New York City and its impact to the Bronx, particularly through housing and particularly on vulnerable people. And the game itself is deeply informed by research and experience, particularly Jane Jacobs' work, The Death and Life of Great American Cities. Of particular interest is how the game is framed by the publisher. It's marketed and sold in their Irregular Conflict series, which itself is a pared down complement of their Coin series. These are war games and conflict games around historical counterinsurgency conflicts. So it's just interesting to see the subject matter here placed in that perspective. And we're as we look at other games, we're looking at this as well. We then engaged with this work. We brought this work to classrooms with students in VPA's class, The Art of War and Peace, and Michael's Intro to Game Studies class. Um, we have limits in classrooms. We have very short time periods. So the games that I'm showing now are designed and chosen to fit within the time we have to play in a game. And we introduced our students first to two games which set up our usual understanding of diplomacy. If we look back and see how games have um, come out. Board games have come out since Diplomacy was first released. Many of them still focus on the specific values of that game. Diplomacy and Trade is kind of a zero-sum game, and with the key mechanics focused on negotiation and backstabbing. I like Intrigue here as it's been described as grad student the game. You are trying to find patronage for your projects with other people. You're also trying to. It's also nepotism, the game. This pure negotiation game pits players as Renaissance era families that are engaging with rampant nepotism. You're trying to seek positions in other families' businesses, offer bribes, but once accepting a bribe, you actually don't have to obligate. You don't have the obligation to honor the highest briber of any verbal deal. And as the marketing copy in the box says, this game is vicious. We also played another similar game, Dragon's Gold, where the players are adventurers who delve into dragons' lairs to defeat the monsters and claim the treasurer's loot. Players are faced with the decision on how to split the loot, but it's timed. If you can't get positive agreement among all in time, no one will actually get the spoils. So both of these games are quick games that showcase the fun that can be had by being mean, cruel, and ruthless. Not always the values that we want to express. These are fun things to do. These are fun games to play. But we don't think these characteristics are the only way negotiation can be fun. So we're looking for other examples. We then played a war game without combat, The Grizzled, designed by Fabian Riffaut and Juan Rodriguez. The art is by Tignus, himself a victim to violence was killed in the Charlie Hebdo attack in 2015, the year the game was published. This is a card game, a cooperative game. It says so on the box right there in big print, in which players help each other survive in the trenches of the First World War. The game focuses attention on trauma as a direct effect of war experience, which both requires help from others to overcome, but also serves to prevent help from actually coming. So it's interesting in how it limits the abilities of the players at the table. Players cooperatively play down cards that on the shared tableau that represent the horrors of trench warfare, from gas to bombardment, charges, and the weather itself, the snow and the rain. The goal is to play all of the cards from the left deck to reveal the dove, the peace, noting we have survived through the armistice. But the longer we play, the closer we are to revealing the monument on the left side. Our names are in stone on a monument because we have not been able to survive. That is our lasting legacy, is our death. But throughout this, you're also playing hard knock cards to yourself, which represent trauma, phobia, and problematic character habits born of war. I'm going into detail on this particular game because we have so few examples of commercial entertainment games that represent these values so well. It connects with the historical perspective and places that viewpoint at the individual soldier's level rather than the state level view most war games have. And it takes people, as collections of experience, which include flaws, trauma, and fear, and treats the subject with care. Also, it plays relatively quickly. If this sounds like a advertisement, it is. It is. It's a great game. And Christmas is coming up for those who celebrate. It has been a great tool to bring to classrooms and workshops. Most people understand how card games generally are played, particularly shedding style games like this. So it only takes a little more effort on the player's parts to figure out the twists that this game has to offer compared to most other games. Very quickly then, how the Change of the Game project has shifted and transmuted over time. We've added new subtitles to it. So Changing the Game Studio India, we invited and worked with Anukriti Gupta, apologies, resident game designer at the University of York in London, where she has been developing Navrud, a decolonizing board game that challenges traditional Eurogame dynamics by focusing on the consequences of land exploitation in India during the colonial period. And we also invited Tomer Perry, the associate director of pedagogy at the Edmund and Lily Safra Centers for Civics for Ethics at Harvard, to play with us and give feedback on her work. Um, and afterwards, with her and Tomer, we played Tycoon India 1981, a recent commercial game designed by Siddhant Chand around nation building in post-colonial India, where you are business people working through time to create your businesses across the subcontinent and succeed and bring India through the post-colonial time period. And lastly, we're taking our project on the road. We're doing Changing the Game of Political Procedural Narratives. Our next move is to go to Circle DC in Washington, DC this April. This is a convention with participants from Congress, the Pentagon, Supreme Court, Library of Congress, and all the broader political machinery of that district. Participants are players, designers, reviewers, and publishers, and in fact, it's put on by Fort Circle Games, a historical board game publisher. And we're excited to meet people there and to do something there to connect our work with this great community of people, community of practice. So now, thank you for that time. We will hear from Gabor Holbeck about the very first public literacies project, AI Tools for Democracy and Self-Awareness.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you for handing over. I hope I can share my screen. Quickly gonna switch. Can you see my screen? Give me a small hands up. Everything all right? Perfect. All right. Thanks for handing over. I was asked to keep it rather short, so see it rather as a pitch, as a extensive report on what we have been doing and what we are going to do. So see the slides as like an extension with some sources that you can check out later. As like a small introduction to myself, I studied physics and went into computational social science, did a lot of AI research, and have also moved in the spaces between computer science in Silicon Valley and the Bay Area in Boston and in Zurich, and have been in that space and have seen how AI is mostly used for economic gains and materialistic gains, and I see that has not led necessarily to happier cultures and societies. And in the coming years, or maybe even longer, I think the main focus of this project and my mission and any company or research I want to do is how we can use AI and tech tools to make people more self-aware, make people more engaged in politics and understand complex systems better. So this is the pillar about my project at the GHI pillar with Rick and Mikhail. And I want to briefly show you what we have been working on and what we want to do. I think we don't have to talk that much about the problems we see: massive polarization and democratic backsliding, depression rates, and mental health crisis. Studies show that we are declining in that realm around the world, but mostly also in the youth and in Western civilizations. We can also see that somehow there might be a shift in this entire space, how we can learn certain skills. And I want to make this comparison between hard skills like math and computer science, or anything that you would learn at school or university or an apprenticeship, and compare that to the social skills that you rather learn not by a curriculum, but by just having the chance of being surrounded with humans, being raised by parents, having talked to your partner, your friends, or a therapist. And we can see that these things differ quite a lot. And we might see, or we want to introduce kind of like a paradigm shift on how we can learn these soft skills as well, in the same way we would learn a new language or chess or coding. Duolingo and chess.com and LeetCode, and we're kind of like inspired by that to have like a practice ground, an exercise sheet, a test to prepare you for life with those skills that you would rather only learn if you have the luck to be in that situation surrounded by the people who will teach you those social skills. So this is what is new with AI. In my view, we can use this this entire emerging paradigm to use it to teach people the necessary consciousness and self-awareness to have a more self-directed and happy life. So how can we do this? 1.5 years ago, I've started a project and have started to look into this. And we have built a project called Diplomatica.ai, which is kind of like Duolingo for emotional intelligence. So it's a gamified way of how you can learn these communication skills and conflict resolution skills. Now, first of all, let's ask the science, let's ask literature and see what has been already researched and seen and investigated how AI could actually help us. There has been a couple of papers showing that AI can decrease the belief systems of the conspiracy beliefs, or can increase common ground findings between opposing parties, or it can also serve some patient-centered communication in the medical realm. So I just want to skip these very fast, but there is like some research being done on this, and therefore we are looking to see some similar effects when we are deploying this and testing this website within a randomized control trial. So how it works basically is that you're simulating a conversation that is emotionally taxing and really hard to manage in real life. Sometimes you have never encountered that situation. Sometimes it's just your biological hardwiredness that would keep you from having a constructive, emotionally intelligent conversation where you can find a solution and make both participants or all participants feel heard and safe. And that's why we want to simulate such a conversation before they actually happen and give at the end a feedback. So and I want to be a bit polarizing here. We have thought a lot about what situations you could simulate and what wouldn't be needed. And we have just scoped out some very controversial, kind of like any opposite side of the spectrum conversation partner or situation that you could simulate and get feedback on and a score of how you can do better. Now, the question is, what is actually the goal, the aim of this? We have to define how we evaluate these conversations. We have to define what is actually what we want to teach. And oftentimes, if we go back, we would say, hey, I am A, and convince me of this and that. That is actually not, I mean, this has been a screenshot from 1.5 years ago. I think since then we should maybe write something else there. But the main goal is not to convince or win or manipulate someone, obviously. It is rather that you start to think before you talk. It is that you are learning what not to say instead of what is exactly what you have to say to have the perfect outcome. So you're optimizing for something else, which is rather self-awareness instead of manipulation. You can also try it out and log in. I think we have deployed it and not announced yet, as we wanted to continue building it. But if you're really curious, you can do this. Very quickly, I mean, right now it's just a chat modality. You can also have it via voice or via VR setting later. But in the end, in the back end, it is a complicated pipeline that we use to create these personas. And also some other research has shown that longer context windows of 2-hour voice conversations that are recorded can serve very well as simulations of parenting styles or emotional personality traits. There are a couple of papers by Meta and so on this. So what do we want to evaluate? Or how do we actually evaluate this? I'm going to skip this quickly. We have collaborated with some researchers from Warwick and Harvard to have an entire sheet of policies that are basically categorizing different behaviors in different situations. Now, this is not the most intelligent solution, but it's definitely a good start and the safest one we know right now. We can't rely on AI just knowing and evaluating what a good conversation is. So we are breaking it down into semantic chunks that get a score assigned to it. And these are oriented around different studies and frameworks that have been already around for years. I think nonviolent communication should be maybe a term people know from Marshall Rosenberg. Effective disagreement is the website of the collaborator we have collaborated with to get this sheet. It's kind of like 500 lines of classification and examples and categorizations of different behaviors, like deflection or communication snippets, like you versus them. Like there are some certain conflict resolution skills that are listed on this platform. And we are basically embedding that into this practice and testing suite. So about the way how we're going to deploy this, maybe some of you know Character AI. Character AI is a platform where you can also just talk to different characters and simulate a conversation. Now that actually also doesn't work really with any competition, but only by having a conversation and a friend. Now we want to gamify it in a similar way, like Duolingo or LeetCode, to keep people using it and learning it and having a drive to improve their abilities and capabilities. I mean, there's tremendous literature on this. We have been inspired by. Also, other platforms have had tremendous success in this. Khan Academy, Duolingo, LeetCode, all of these have, or chess.com have ELO scores and comparisons and competitions and skills and everything. And this is where we are taking some inspiration from for the tool. I can quickly show you how this would look like. This is not deployed yet, but very soon. We have again, a skill tree that you could exactly follow like Duolingo or collection of arguments. So this could be like a crowdsourced wisdom space where people exchange what one can do in a certain situation if they face it. Imagine you want to talk to a right-wing extremist who is very much not in your opinion, or a left-wing extremist. You can first master that emotional layer that is needed for the constructive conversation. So about this pitch, I mean, these are some other features. We don't need to go into the detail. I want to come rather to some risks and mitigations we can do against them. I think many people, I mean, a lot of times if I talk about this, people find this highly controversial and have many opposing views. I want to name some, mainly that we might run into the risk of oversimplifying, overfitting, and learning wrong stereotypes about the persona that you're simulating. We try to fix this by having 20 to 50 different persons with different backgrounds and behavior styles, even if the topic of the conversation is the same. So you're not learning exactly what to do in one situation. So you can't really predict who you're talking to if you're spinning up a new conversation. And other times we have also tested hallucinations and biases in different kind of settings. I think these are important parts of this entire pipeline to test, to know how sensitive our model is. Now, again, I want to emphasize that we don't want to have people to learn the perfect outcome or the perfect way to an outcome. It's rather training the reward function of a human to first think before they speak. This is very much not rewarding in real life, because most people don't change in that moment when you're trying to talk to them. They're changing if they're not observed, if they feel safe. And that's why you don't get the reward if you had a fight with someone or a conversation. And if you can simulate this in a low stakes environment like this one, you can maybe learn that reward function. Your brain could learn your reward function so that in real life, you have already adjusted your brain to have more constructive conversations from the beginning. Now I want to also name some open questions and how we want to go forward. I think really difficult questions to answer, and this is something to tinker about and have a nice philosophical chat at dinner, is can actually humans learn only by pure positive reinforcement? If we would have a world where everyone is trained with diplomatic AI to have super nonviolent communication, would we be able to transmit um, uh, trauma or certain human experiences that have been experienced for decades? An example would be the Holocaust. How do we actually transfer that feeling if the experience is decades or generations away, or do we need an emotional connection to the person or the simulated person if we want to learn something with it? These are I think there are many opinions on this, and I think these are important to know about and take into consideration when we're building these things. And for what we want to do in the future is we have not launched or announced this website. It's deployed, yes, you can try it out, yes, but actually it's diplomatica.ai, not just I. Would be a cool domain though. And want to announce it to have a seed ground of users for a randomized control trial. And also kind of like a workshop or competitions in conference or event settings. And yeah, I think we're always open to hear people's views and inspirations, new projects, to join as engineers or researchers. I think at some point we also need some scaling distribution work and in the policy and governmental side of things. So this is what we are currently at. And I have not named the team, but right now it's 4 people working on this. Alec McGale from Cornell, who has built this with me, and then 2 other researchers who are conducting research at Harvard and Warwick. I want to quickly thank you guys. I'm happy to share more information on the slides if you have any questions. I'm happy to chat. And I think now I'm going to quickly hand over to Lana to continue with something truly special.
Thank you, Gabor. So I'm Lana Cook. I'm Associate Director of the MIT Systems Awareness Lab within Comparative Media Studies and Writing. And in our lab, we think about systems, in a number of different levels. So we think about, starting with our inner system. So this kind of body, somatic, emotional, inner landscape. We think about systems in the relational. So, we on this call are in a little microsystem here and now. And then all the ways we usually talk about systems, right? The webs of interdependence, across our ecology, our technology, our society, our politics, our cultures. And so in my kind of this brief session here, I'm going to offer more of an interlude, a little practice opportunity for us to actually, build on what Gabor was talking about in terms of building our emotional intelligence, our self-awareness. This is a very non-technical practice, a really ancient, if we talk about, GHI's real interest in, deep time. This is a deep time practice in terms of our self-awareness. And so I'm going to invite you to, with the spirit of experimentation and play, join me in a little contemplative practice. So I invite you, if you feel comfortable, to just close your eyes. I have no slides. We're giving ourselves a little break from the screen, right? So you may close your eyes, or maybe even just find like a neutral place on the ground or on the floor, just somewhere to rest your gaze. And I invite you just to take a couple deep breaths. Just noticing as your breath moves through your body, allowing with each breath a little relaxation, some ease, just allowing everything to kind of settle. And as you just continue to breathe at your own natural pace, just allowing yourself to rest here. I invite you just to simply notice anything that feels, stirred up within you. As you've heard the different topics that we've been exploring so far on the call. As you continue to breathe, just sort of noticing any sensations in the body, any images, thoughts. We've been exploring everything from the state of the humanities to war and diplomacy, colonialism, to AI. And that can stir up a lot. So perhaps noticing as you breathe any places of either contraction, perhaps of excitement, maybe a mind wandering, wanting to chase particular trains of thought. Just inviting you just to kind of simply notice, no need to judge or fix or follow, the rabbit holes of the mind, just kind of coming to, can I kind of simply notice and scan my inner system? I invite you to take another nice deep breath, releasing those questions. Just simply noticing what it feels like to be seated in your chair, feet on the floor, tending to the breath. Now I invite you to bring up a memory of play. A time where you felt especially playful. Perhaps from childhood. Perhaps most recent. Just kind of noticing within your body, your heart, your mind, as you kind of bring to mind this memory of play and try to really think, who was there? What was there? What was around you? Just sort of noticing any sensations in the body, the heart, or in the spirit that come to you as you just reside in this space of play. Now I invite you to take another nice deep breath, releasing that memory, that exercise. Then you can just kind of gently, at your own pace, maybe bring a little movement to the body, maybe movement in the shoulders, maybe in the neck, wiggling the feet, the toes, anything that feels supportive. And then just gradually opening our eyes, gently bringing the light back in, coming into our collective space together. So I invite you just to reflect, and you can use either the chat or feel free to open your mic, and we have a time for just a few minutes just to hear a couple of voices. So what did I notice? As I sensed into my inner landscape, as I brought some self-awareness to even some of the subjects we're talking about today. And then as we maybe move into our next segment, where does a sense of playfulness show up in my body? So where do I feel play? Where does play feel present? So invite in the chat, feel free to open your mics, even if you're off camera. We'd just love to hear a couple of voices.
I was hanging out with my 3-year-old niece last night, and she started like doing weird kid stuff with her hands, and then I started mirroring her, and then she like cracked up when she noticed what I was doing. And as I was recalling that memory, I just found myself smiling. And it's like it feels very obvious to say, right? But remembering playfulness like brought a smile to my face.
Thank you, Greg. I see in the chat, Rick, tension in the jaw, maybe from the first part, but then have some playfulness in the shoulders, the feet. Others.
I want to bounce off of Rick's comment, playfulness in the shoulders, because I think I feel that too, but because playfulness for me is also often connected to risk taking and embarrassment. It's not just my shoulders, it's also my pits. And then I'm like, I can't. When you said, do you want to tell us where you felt it? I'm like, I don't know if I want to admit that I feel playfulness in my armpits, but there you go.
Rilla, I think that's fantastic. And thank you for your vulnerability and sharing, because it also shows the complexity to Gaber's presentation, the nuance of particular emotional states, that playfulness, which we associate with such a positive affect, can also actually come with fear of vulnerability, a tightness, and so, if we don't develop that sort of somatic literacy around, oh, wait, actually, maybe if I'm feeling a little sweaty, I have sweaty palms when I think of playfulness in some cases. Oh, because there's some edge maybe I'm going past in my comfort zone. And yet, the reward of playfulness is to Greg's upturned smile. That's worth the sweat, worth the tension, perhaps. So thank you for playing with me here and just this little interlude of, just bringing some awareness to our bodies. Hopefully for the rest of the call, we feel some freedom of movement. And I'd love to now hand it over to Mikkel for a panel discussion on play and games.
Thank you, Lana. That was amazing. I completely forgot where I was and forgot to bring up my notes for the next session here, but now I have them. So for the last segment, we have prepared a special surprise for you. We have a couple of guest panelists here, and the reason for this mini panel is really that what we've been talking a lot about, not just in the pillar, but also at the annual conference, was bridging the gap between practitioners and academics when we address these really difficult and important issues that we are addressing in GHI. And that made me think that maybe we should do something, inviting some people who are hybrids of sorts. They are both practitioners in terms of game designers, but also have an academic streak in them. For some of us, it's more on the academic side. For some, it might be more on the practitioner side. But without further ado, I would like to start this panel by letting the panelists introduce themselves, and maybe we can start with you, Sharia.
Hi, good morning, good evening. I'm actually calling in from Singapore, so it's very, very late in the evening for me. Almost morning again, so I guess it's still good morning for everyone, and good afternoon for everyone else who is in different places around the world. I am Sharia Yuandini. I am currently with Research for Impact, but like Michael said, I did have a little bit of a academic background. I have a doctorate degree in both anthropology and sociology, but I like to think that I've been a gamer my entire life. So I think being here today is fantastic, and Michael invited me to be part of the panel because I recently launched my first board game. It's called Kartini, From Darkness to Light, and Kartini is set in late 1800, early 1900 Indonesia. And the board game is about women education and how it showcases how educating women actually the first stepping stone of Indonesia liberating itself from colonialism at that time. So I'm hoping to talk a little bit more about the game, but really glad to be here also with the members of the panel. Thanks, Michael.
And Greg?
Hello, I am Greg Loring Albright. I teach and study games at Harrisburg University of Science and Technology, and I'm also a game designer. My most recent release, which is like shipping to backers, I think in the next couple of weeks, is Keep the Faith, which is a storytelling game about imagining and then evolving over the course of 500 years a fictional religion, coming out through Central Michigan University Press. I've done other stuff too, but that's the one I'm coming out most recently.
And Rita.
Hey everyone, I'm Rila Khalid. I'm an associate professor at Concordia University, and my area is computation arts. My research interests span persuasive games, serious games, experimental games, and design research methods. But something I do think about quite a lot is the sort of intersection between games and values, and particularly games and cultural values.
Thank you, everybody. So I have prepared a question each for the different panelists, but I hope the other panelists will want to pick up on the threads of these conversations. So I'll start with you, Sharia. So last time we spoke, which was in preparation for this event, I had just gotten Cartini. It was still in the shrink wrap, so I hadn't played it yet, but I have now, and I absolutely love this game. I can tell by the snaps and claps and stuff on my screen that I'm not the only one here. Um, and it's a game with a lot of depth and complexity, which I really enjoy in a board game. But it might also create a bit of a hurdle to overcome for new players. So my question is, why did you decide to make a game that is so deep and complex and tries to integrate all these different historical strands into one kind of participatory narrative experience?
Well, first of all, Michael, thank you. I'm very happy that you actually enjoyed the game. That's always nice to hear for a board game designer. Complexity in a game, that's a really big question. And for me, I think complexity in games is a function of several different things, right? Sometimes you can't help it. Because when you're creating a game, you want the game to be balanced. You don't want a game to be lopsided, that one way of towards winning, for example, is a little bit easier to do rather than the other ways of towards winning. So then you might need to introduce different kind of mechanism into the game, which increases the complexity of the game in order to balance the game out, right? So one element of it is the mechanism of the game. That sometimes determine what is the level of complexity of the game by the end of the day. The second element, I would say, is the story. So, and I think there's always tension between the mechanism of the game and the story that you want to tell in the game. And I'm the kind of designer that leans more towards the story rather than the mechanism of the game. So my mechanism serves the story that I want to tell. So, to at a certain point, then that mechanism for me is enough in terms of the level of complexity in order to be able to tell the story of the game. But I do think that there's maybe like two other aspects that would contribute to complexity of the game. And I think Rick mentioned at the very beginning before, right? Like whether a game can be both fun, but also consider certain kind of values. I think there's also a tension between values and fun as well. Because when I was creating my game, I also want to be sure that even though I am telling a particular story and there is a historical context to it that I really don't want to be missing from my game, I also first and foremost want the game to be fun. And managing and balancing all of these aspects basically then lead to a particular level of complexity. But ironically, my game is actually not complex enough. It's actually not that, it's actually the other way around, because my game is considered to be a type of a game that is called Euro. So Euro type of games are games that are heavy on strategy, and you need to think about how each components hang with each other. There are many different paths to victories, basically. So it is a higher level of complexity. And the reason why I wanted to create a Euro is because Euro is the kind of game that I like to play more. So I have a little bit more understanding on how to create a Euro, for example. But the Euro that I created, so this type of Euro, Kartini, it's actually not as complex as other types of Euro games out there. So I have had gamers who've played Euro games came up to me and say, why don't you actually increase the level of complexities, right? So people have come to me, yeah, exactly, Greg. I think definitely that's the case, right? Like, because I have had gamers come up to me and say, oh, for example, the battle function, the battle mechanism in your game, why don't you make it very unique from one battle to the next? Like each of the battle tells a different story, for example, right? Or each of the schools and in your game, why don't each of the schools have a different ways or different capabilities, for example, different uniqueness? And these are all a question that you can always say yes to, right? You can always say, okay, yeah, I can definitely create the fights to be very different from one fight to the next. Yes, the schools can be very different. But if you do that, the complexity of the games would increase because there are so many more variables that a gamer needs to think about when they balance out all of the different things that they need to do in a game. So it's always a decision making on at one point you want to stop in terms of making the game not too complex, but tell the story that you want to tell. And there's it's always kind of like there will be gamers that be like, oh, it needs to be more complex or it needs to be less complex. But when I decide for my game where the level of complexity that I'm stopping is like I said, it tells the story that I want to tell, but at the same time, it's still intuitive enough for exactly like you said, Michael, maybe someone who's not so familiar with this kind of game to be able to grasp. So that's why the basic mechanism of the game, I hope, is actually quite intuitive because the idea is that you're creating a school, right? So you're establishing a school for girls. So the idea is that if you have schools, what do you need? You need teachers, you need books, you need the girls themselves to go to school. And that's the different mechanism that I introduce in the game, which anyone who a bit more familiar with the education system probably would be able to grasp and say, okay, this is the way that I want to go about it. And the reason why I stopped there was because I want the game to also be accessible for people in Indonesia, and Indonesian gamers tend to like games that might be not so complex. So there are so many different kind of like variables that I had to consider to then arrive at the level of complexity that my game is currently at. But it can always go more complex. But I do think personally making games more accessible and quote unquote more simple is actually more challenging than making games a bit more complex. That's a long answer, but hopefully that answers your question, Michael.
Yes. Any other panelists have something to add? I want to ask you, Greg, about the themes we choose for our games. And people are probably fed up with me talking about this, but I've been trying to sort of convince everybody I meet about how games are changing and they're not just about fantasy or science fiction or whatever anymore, but we're actually dealing with real issues in our games today much more than we have done perhaps ever before. And I'm super excited about that. But I also know that there can be a bit of a resistance where people feel like games really are just these sort of things for kids or things for escape from reality or whatever. And why are we drawing in all of these real world complexities and depicting struggle and suffering and all these kinds of things. And I want to direct the question to you, Greg, because you really been jumping between different subject matters. You mentioned Keep the Faith, which is about sort of storytelling around religion, and also kind of opening up for thinking through religious issues. Before that, you were involved in the new version of Block by Block, where you're people demonstrating in the streets and fighting the police. And you mentioned to me you've also recently made the game Resilience, which is about crisis survival and being in the aftermath of some kind of community crisis. So, what kind of reactions have you had to making games that aren't necessarily meant to be educational first? They're meant to be fun first, but also deal with these really meaty issues.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question, and thank you for inviting me to be here. Shockingly less backlash than you might expect, especially considering that Block by Block is like an aggressively political game that kind of wears its colors on its sleeve. And I think kind of connecting to what Sharia said about thinking about sort of like designing for an audience, right? I heard you saying about like, oh, designing for the not quite as heavy market, for people for whom, you know, that like hyper deep Euro game will never hit. And that's not a bad thing, right? To say like, oh yeah, that's not who I want to play this game. Maybe Sharia's next game will be for those people, right? But like Block by Block kind of is preaching to the choir, right? It's not necessarily it's not trying to convince people, right? I'm not trying to put this game in front of MAGA people and say, join the resistance, right? Like that's not what it's for, right? It's depicting this struggle. It is encouraging people who are part of the struggle. A lot of our playtesters are folks who've been in the street, who've been doing the stuff that the game depicts, and it's like a way for them to kind of remember their past action and like build solidarity and connection with one another. So I think the short answer, right, is like kind of like knowing your audience, right? Like Resilience, the game you mentioned, is a game I just released at the Indie Games Night Market at PAX Unplugged, and it's about community disaster preparedness, and it's specifically from like an anarchist perspective. Like the government is not in the game because FEMA has been defunded and now it's being run by someone who thinks it's bad, right? So like it has a politics to it, but that game I'm specifically thinking about putting it in front of people who might not have that politics. And so the politics are sort of backgrounded a little more. Whereas in Block by Block, it's absolutely foregrounded. There's some reviews on Board Game Geek of Block by Block that are like 1 star, Antifa, the game, right? And it's like, I'm glad, I'm not happy that that person left a 1 star review, but I'm happy that that person knows like, this isn't for me. You know, knowing your audience, people are still going to backlash because people are terrible or whatever, but like, there's a lot less negative stuff out there than I maybe expected when T.L. Simons, the originator of Block by Block, invited me to join him in that project.
You could tell that person that there is actually a game called Antifa, the game, and then maybe
Yes,
they
right.
should also not go play that game. But yeah, so finally, for before we start wrapping this up, for Rilla, we've been talking here about games that are set in history and games that are set in the present day, or even kind of poking into the future. And I think that's an interesting question for us as game designers, where in time and space we want to set the goings on of the game. And I found your discussion on the concept of paratopian design to be really helpful in thinking about intentionality when it comes to temporality. So can you maybe say a little bit about the concept and how you think about temporality in games?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Michael. And thank you, everyone. It's been super lovely and enriching to be part of this conversation. So, all right, paratopian design. So that idea came out of a research project I was working on a few years ago where I became very excited about a pocket of interaction design, which gets referred to as speculative design. So the idea with speculative design is that designers produce objects and they may not be functional objects. Like for instance, this pencil that I have in my hand, uh, it might look like a pencil, but maybe the whole thing is it's grown from mycelium. And, maybe what I am trying to get people to think about by producing something that is made from mycelium, maybe what I want you to engage with is this idea that we live in a world in which anything can be produced from mycelium. Okay, so it's really about using the kind of semantics and realness of design objects to get people to, like almost as a portal for people to step into being able to believe that you can sort of extrapolate a whole world around that object. So what I noticed the more I got into this work, and like my team and I, we designed something called NeoCub. So NeoCub was my response to Quebec legislation that got brought in about limitations on women who wear niqab, which is the full face cover that some Muslim women wear. Like in more countries than you would think, and parts of countries, like this is just Quebec, it's not all of Canada, but there are restrictions around being able to wear these types of garments. And what my position and the position of a lot of feminists is that why are you restricting what women are allowed to put on their bodies? Like, it doesn't matter what you think that garment is about, but if you tell someone that they cannot wear it, then you are limiting them. So the idea with NeoCub is that we wanted to make a digital experience that was dystopian and would take the idea of controlling people's appearance to the extreme. So in this experience, we used a Kinect to, like, this is back in the days of Kinect being used, right? You could use Kinect to grab a video feed of someone, and then we had a separate app which then took that video feed and allowed it to be replaced with the face of whoever you wanted. For instance, if I am a woman wearing niqab, the idea is that anyone else out there in the world who looks at me, who is offended by me wearing niqab, can then change how they experience me such that I am not wearing it anymore. Like maybe they take the niqab off, maybe they make me look like them. So we made this thing, and then what occurred to me, because I had my research assistants play this thing, try this thing out. I had my students try it out, and everyone in the room with me, they were all nodding. Okay, so this picks up on points that Greg was making, Sharia a little bit as well, but when you make these experiences, when you design experiences to invite or engage a particular type of political discourse, you need to think about who is experiencing that. And the problem I encountered was that the experience I had made was clearly so dystopian and so, you're meant to shake your head and say this is not a good world. Right? There really wasn't much nuance there for the people that I was exploring this thing with, right? I was preaching to the choir. And so where that idea of paratopian comes in is that I want people, when they design, to not necessarily reach for the easy utopia or the easy dystopia, but rather to try and reach for something that could be possible, but maybe it's just a bit sideways. Okay, so instead of here and now, maybe it is parallel to the reality that we have now, or maybe that paralleling is happening by, in terms of temporality, pulling us a little bit forward or a little bit backward. Because what we want is to be able to give people enough reality that they can sort of critically think about the reality that you are presenting. So where the temporality comes in with Paratopia, I would say that if you want to design these experiences for people to really chew over and mull over, you cannot make it too different from their current reality. Because if it's too different from their current reality, then it's too easy for them to say, oh, this is not, this is not something that's going to change my mind because it has nothing to do with me.
I think it's brilliant. It really made some things fall to place in my head. Thank you so much, Rilla. So to wrap this up, I have a kind of a brief question, hopefully brief answers from all the panelists. So one of the foundational aspects of GHI is the insistence of including heart as well as mind and hand in everything that we do. So what does conducting research and design with heart mean to you? Maybe we can go the same order. So start with Sharia again.
No, I think that's very important, right? Because when at least in my when I design games, I really want people to really experience the games. So not necessarily just playing the game, but actually really experiencing the game. So in Kartini, for example, I'd like people to feel like when they're playing the game, they're slowly opening up society, because you start with one school and you start with a couple of girls being able to go to school, for example, and those girls graduated and then they pick up professions. And then when they do that, they open up possibilities for you. So then you can also do more things. Societies as a whole can do more things. So then you do feel like there's that simulation of, if we open up education for women, then we do allow the society to flourish even more, right? So we given more opportunities to people. So I want people to experience that and through playing the game, rather than just going to say like, okay, first I'm going to do A and then I'm going to do B and then it allows me to do C, for example, in order to get me victory. But actually having that experience as a simulation. So I do feel like board games and any other kind of games is a simulation, which you then as a designer, you pick and choose which one of those experiences that you want people to really go through when they're playing your game. So for me, heart is very important in a sense, kind of like that experience part, rather than just using your brain in order to be able to achieve something.
Greg?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree, pun intended. I have been feeling a lot of like as I play test my games and as I just play games for fun, and in part I think inspired by playing games in remote settings like this, through the pandemic, and now as I have remote friends who I play games with, it's like you kind of have to over emote if you're gonna emote online, and doing that in person has been fun, and thinking about how to design to allow for those moments of kind of like big emotions. I also have small children. And the other day I was playing with my own 3-year-old. We were playing, classic kids match game, and ostensibly a competitive game, yet every time anyone made a match, he would stand up in his chair and go, "Yeah!" And he was so excited for us to get matches, even though it meant he wasn't going to win. And I was just like, there's a game design lesson there. I'm not sure what it is aside from be a 3-year-old, but I've been mulling over how to like let those big feelings come to the fore and how to design to bring those big feelings to the fore.
And Rilla?
This is a really, really interesting question, because I think that if you had asked me this 15 years ago, my response would have been different. But there's something about, being post tenure, but also occupying a research space where there still isn't that much work, where like there's that moment where you realize, actually, I could be doing research differently. I could be encouraging my students differently. I could be reminding them of why they're here, reminding them of the responsibility and the privilege that they have, the power that they have to amplify particular voices and quiet other voices. So that's something that I try. I tell all of my students now, wear your positionality on your sleeve, because your positionality is it's the way that you experience the world. So make that obvious to yourself and for other people as well. And the other thing that this approach will not work for everyone, but for my kind of brain, it works. I've tried to make everything that I do be internally consistent. Okay, so in terms of head and heart, it should all kind of work together. And if you keep doing things that way, they will continue to be self-supporting.
I wish Wiebke would have been here for that. I can feel her in the future almost shedding a tear from that response, because it's there's so much resonance with what she has expressed of being like the whole reason for founding GHI in the first place. Okay, so this is where we open up to the auditorium to ask questions from anyone of the speakers or the panelists, or even just offer comments if you have any. So, and I would invite everybody to, if they feel comfortable with it, also turn their cameras on for the Q&A section. So, any questions or comments? As per usual, no one wants to be the first one. I heard
I don't want
something.
to steal time from the attendees. So if one of them wants to chime in, but I did want to say, Rilla, the concept of the paratopia is really interesting, and it reminded me of something I've been thinking about in both in Block by Block and Keep the Faith, where like that sense you talked about, sort of like not making it too different, but also I've been thinking about not making it too same, right? Like a lot of this game work in like sort of like serious adjacent games is about history. And when I did a religion game, I didn't want to do a historical religion game, A, because I am lazy and didn't want to do all that research, and B, because I wanted to open it up to people to draw their own connections, to say, oh, this is a fictional model, and that kind of estrangeness then lets them draw the real in, and this concept of the paratopia is a really useful word for that. So thank you.
Can I jump in with a response to that?
Absolutely.
Greg, yeah, that I absolutely agree with you. Like you do need that difference for sure. You need that difference. I think one thing that we have not brought up, but concerns everyone here, is the role of embodiment in terms of empathy, connection, and for everyone who's involved in analog games or board games, there is something really, really fundamentally different about being co-located with other bodies in space that changes the way that you play, right? So I think that if you took the board games that you've been working with and then somehow managed to transform them into fully online remote multiplayer experiences, they would land really differently. So I think like that's a crucial part of what's going on, is how we navigate the sort of social protocols that we just we inherit from being alive day to day, but then also the systems that these games are asking us to step into. And I think, Greg, so when you talk about how there needs to be difference, I think part of the difference can also even be that. It's the different rules that we would normally feel we're allowed to draw on versus the ones that games ask us to draw on. And analog games in particular are asking us to draw on them both at the same time, in a sense.
I don't want to put you on the spot here, Lana, but I feel like the connection between embodiment and systems is right up your alley. Do you have any more reflections around that?
Yes, I mean, and I just love this whole discussion because one of the things that we're really interested in as a research lab and that we study is the kind of phenomena of social fields, which is like, the set of relationships that we have within a given time and space that we feel has a quality of its own. Like we're each shaping it, we're each contributing to it, and part of what we look at is, how do we show up within particular sets of relationships because maybe our quality of attention and awareness. But to Rilla's point, the kinds of protocols, the sort of artifacts that are within a space, and so within the space of a game, really explicit protocols. And yet then we're also bringing particular mental models from our own personal experience of what it means to play, what it means to take risks, to have strategy. And so what's explicit in the game protocol and then what's not, what's more than implicit, kind of space, and how do you have spaces that maybe you actually unpack to these pieces around sort of preaching to the choir, working with different communities that might have particular worldviews. And so how are the worldviews of the player surfaced in the game itself as they're maybe inhabiting different kinds of roles? That's a space that we're really interested in, and how do we make those more visible to people and have places where they can kind of critique and unpack how they're showing up and shaping different systems day to day so that we can be more aware of that kind of habitus.
That actually makes me think of something that became very explicit when me and Rick worked together with a couple of Puerto Ricans to make a game about the debt crisis in Puerto Rico. And we've been playing the game with a lot of people here in Boston, but also with a lot of people in San Juan. And they see different things in the same artifact. Just the illustrations of the board are so meaningful to them because it's the board is basically a beautifully illustrated map of the Puerto Rico, and but it's not like a tourist map. It's kind of the opposite. It highlights places where tourists normally don't go, and it makes Puerto Ricans feel so seen and like I'm from there, and that's never on a map. While people here see completely different things. I was wondering, Sharia, is that something that you've come across with your game as well? I guess you have been playing it with people both in Europe and in Indonesia, or in Singapore for that matter.
Yeah, when people experience it very differently. And I remember when I designed Cartini and decided to go with a Swedish publisher, actually. People actually ask why, and many different questions about it, right? Because there's this imagination. Again, when we talk about preaching to the choir, I do when I'm thinking about designing my game, I do think about people in Indonesia in order to be able to access the game. But I did not design the game solely for Indonesians. I think that's very important, right? Because there's this shyness of creating a game that is set in a location or a time period, for example, that is not so familiar to many different people. Because exactly what Rila said, if people don't feel like there's any connection between them and the game, they might think that they cannot access that game. They're not interested. They're not even wanting to play that game. I find that very fascinating because I'm the kind of person who, if it's different for me, then it's actually very interesting for me because that means like I've never experienced it and I would like to try it out, right? So there's always a tension between me thinking, okay, I'm designing this game, but not necessarily only for Indonesians to play it, but for everyone to be able to access it. So I need to think in mind exactly what Greg said, who's the audience, and it becomes a choice of and taking risk, right? If for example, if I design it for Indonesians people only, there might be a lot more interest because they're very familiar with it. But then I lose the opportunity to actually introduce the story of Kartini to the rest of the world, and also the story of Indonesia to the rest of the world, which is part of the reasons why I also want to create the game, right? So yeah, there's always a tension to it. And but Michael, if I can kind of like link back to what everyone's been talking about in terms of embodiment and relationship and experiencing games, right? I just want to say one thing, and I'm not a person who's for like banning things or not allowing to use a particular words, right? But if there's one thing that I really would love all of us to consider is to reconsider saying things like it's just a game, because I think that's a very, very questionable thing to say, right? Because it's just a game sending a signal to someone that, oh, you are over immersed, or you are taking this more seriously than it's supposed to, right? Like, or this is something that is not like reality, and reality is more important than what you're experiencing right now in the game. But it's just, yeah, exactly, agree, Rila. Like, you don't really hear people say that, right? But I feel like when we are, like what Lana is saying as well, right? Like when we committed to a game, we are committed to a world for a certain period of time. We said, now the rules are like this. Now this is what we allow ourselves to experience. And to say to someone, oh, it's just a game, if they got upset or they got embarrassed or there's something like that, it's just a game. It's almost the same to say to someone like who's experiencing difficulties to say, oh, why don't you just snap out of it, right? So yeah, just to like I said, I don't want to say like please don't say this anymore, but I think we should really reconsider saying, oh, it's just a game, and what it means by saying that.
Yeah, I totally agree, and it's actually something as I was working on the book, and after it came out, a lot of the sort of defensive stance of when I was critiquing games for being colonialist or dealing poorly with sensitive issues like slavery and so on, they would go, "Ah, shut up! It's just a game; it doesn't matter." But I think what we have proven in this panel, if not before, is that it does matter, and that also comes with a responsibility. So as designers, we actually have the ability to put some of our mindset, some of our thoughts into cultural artifacts that can travel far beyond what our voices can travel and actually have an effect on people. We don't know what it's going to be exactly, but we still have the responsibility to forge something that we believe in and that we think is important. Unless there are, do we have anyone who has sort of sitting here boiling up a question over time for the panel? No? In that case, I would just like to thank all the participants, everybody who came and listened to us, and Johan as a representative for the operative branch of GHI for allowing us to do this today. And maybe, Johan, I don't know if you have any final words about the next event or something like that. But thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Michael. Wonderful forum from wonderful team. As we wrap up this forum, I would like to share some information about the next forum, which is scheduled for January 9th, 10 a.m. and which will be organized under the pillar Humans and Their Literatures. And the speakers are Ugo Mondini, Michael Anger, Marina Bazzani, Di Wang, and Vipke Deneke. Oh, I forgot to share my screen. Excuse me. Okay, these are the next forums to be scheduled. And the last announcement for those who haven't signed up for the GHI news mailing list, you can find a join our mailing list here at the front page of the website, and you can receive the registration info of the next forum and also GHI news if you sign up for the mailing list. Hey, with this, we conclude the fifth CHI forum. Thank you once again, everyone, for your participation, all the speakers, guest speakers, and the audiences. Thank you very much.